She was just a struggling writer in a soaked thrift store dress. He was a billionaire hiding from his own empire. One stolen dance on a rainy rooftop changed everything. But what happens when love collides with secrets, power, and a world determined to tear them apart? Sienna Cole never meant to fall for Damian Blackwell. But she did. And what they built together? It wasn't luck, it was choice. Every single day. Where are you watching from? Don't forget to subscribe for more powerful love stories that stay with you long after they end. Sienna Cole wasn't supposed to be at the Grand Marlowe that night. Rain soaked through her thrifted navy dress, the hem heavy and cold around her ankles as she stepped off the elevator into the gilded lobby. Her heels, the only pair remotely formal she owned, clicked sharply across the marble floor. She walked fast, not because she belonged, but because if she moved quickly enough, maybe no one would notice she didn't. The doorman didn't question her. She'd come in holding a catering case, a favor for Jules, her best friend and part-time miracle worker, who'd begged her to drop off a missing wine list. "Come up, just for 5 minutes," Jules had said, whispering on the phone like she was smuggling her into a crime scene. "You've had the worst week. There's music, free champagne, no one will know you're not supposed to be here." Sienna hadn't said yes, but she hadn't said no either. And now here she was, walking into the Grand Marlowe's rooftop ballroom, dripping at the edges and emotionally frayed after a soul-crushing pitch meeting at a production company that morning. Her script, a coming-of-age story about a girl and her estranged father, had been rejected without so much as a second glance. The executive had said, "It's too quiet, not commercial enough." Then he'd smiled, like that was supposed to be helpful. The ballroom was all light and gold and soft jazz reverberating off the ceiling. Glittering chandeliers swayed gently as the storm outside tossed rain against the floor-to-ceiling windows. Guests in black tie finery glided across the polished parquet, laughing into their glasses and orbiting one another with effortless confidence. Sienna felt like she'd stumbled into a dream she wasn't meant to see. She pressed herself into a far corner near the refreshments, hoping to blend in, maybe snag a canapé and disappear unnoticed. But then the music changed. Live now, not background filler, but something smoky and real. A trumpet crooned something that made her skin prickle. Her feet, traitorous and yearning, started to shift in rhythm. The only problem was, she didn't have a partner. Everyone else seemed to arrive in pairs, knowing how to waltz, how to dip, how to be adored. Everyone but her. She was seconds from slipping back into the elevator when she saw him. He stood near the open terrace doors, tall and still, a man carved into shadow and marble. His suit was black, perfectly tailored, like it had been measured by someone who knew his secrets. His tie was loosened, his jaw sharp and clean-shaven, but what struck her most was the way he looked at the dancers, not with envy or boredom, but with something like longing. Before she could overthink it, Sienna moved toward him, her pulse kicking faster with each step. "Excuse me," she said, barely above the music. He turned. Up close, his eyes were a stormy gray blue, and his features were even more striking, too precise to be accidental. He looked like he didn't belong here either, which made her brave enough to go on. "Would you?" She cleared her throat. "Would you dance with me?" The man blinked slowly, as if pulling himself from a faraway place. "I'm sorry? I know. Weird, random stranger. But I need to dance tonight," she said in a rush. "I promise I won't talk your ear off. One song. That's it." He stared at her for a long moment, then something shifted. A slow, amused smile tugged at his lips, not mocking, but intrigued. "One song," he repeated, nodding slightly. "I think I can handle that." His hand was warm as he took hers, firm and grounding, and Sienna followed him onto the floor before she could regret it. The song was slow, silky. He placed one hand lightly on her waist, the other holding hers in a way that felt almost reverent. It took her a beat to realize she was breathing in sync with the music. "I'm Sienna, by the way," she offered as they moved. He hesitated before answering. "Damian?" "Damian," she echoed. "Thanks for saving me from looking like a wallflower. I doubt you could ever look like a wallflower." The way he said it, low, certain, made her throat tighten. "You come to these often?" she asked, trying to deflect. His mouth twitched. "Something like that." They danced in silence after that, not awkward, just attentive. He didn't look at anyone else, He didn't check his phone or try to lead too much. He simply danced as if nothing else mattered for the moment. The song ended, but neither of them let go. "Another?" he asked, his voice rougher now. She nodded. 2 songs later, breathless and flushed, they stepped onto the terrace. The city unfolded beneath them, lit in 1,000 glittering points of gold. The rain had eased into a mist that kissed their skin. Sienna crossed her arms partly from the chill. "Let me guess, you're some kind of hedge fund guy? App developer? Secret royalty?" Damien chuckled, a low, genuine sound. "None of the above." "What then?" He looked at her sideways. "What do you think?" "Honestly?" She tilted her head. "You're either pretending to be rich to impress women, or you're actually rich and pretending to be normal." His brow lifted. "That's oddly specific." She shrugged. "I'm a writer. I raid people." "You're a writer?" "Trying to be," she said. "Mostly what I write these days is rejection emails to myself." There was a pause. "For what it's worth," he said, voice softer, "you're the most interesting thing I've seen in this place all night." Sienna's stomach flipped. "You're good at this." "I'm not trying to be." They stood like that, close but not touching, silent but not strained. Then, from behind them, a voice broke the spell. "Mr. Blackwell, they're ready for you." Sienna turned. "Mr. Blackwell?" Damien's jaw tensed slightly. "Sorry, that's me." Her eyes widened. "As in Damien Blackwell? Like Blackwell Capital?" He nodded once, jaw tight. Sienna took a step back. "I just asked a billionaire to dance." "I like that you didn't know." She stared at him, thoughts scrambling. "I should go." "Sienna?" "No, it's fine," she said quickly, already retreating. "Thanks for the dance. Good luck with your empire." He didn't stop her. Just stood there, rain misting across his shoulders, watching the elevator doors close around her. Inside the ballroom, his assistant reappeared. "Sir?" "The board." But Damien didn't move. He was still staring at the space where Sienna had been, still holding the faintest trace of her perfume in the air. And he already knew. He wasn't going to let her walk away that easily. Sienna didn't expect to see him again. By Monday morning, she'd sealed the memory into a mental box labeled ridiculous and shoved it under everything else. Overdue rent, a drained checking account, and 3 more. "We regret to inform you" emails in her inbox. She sat on her couch, wrapped in an oversized hoodie, chewing the end of a pen as her cursor blinked on a blank page. She was half convinced that if she stared long enough, a brilliant screenplay might materialize through sheer willpower. Her phone buzzed. "Come to the Dandelion," Jules said as soon as she picked up. "I'm working." "You're glaring at a Word doc and drinking expired almond milk." "Maybe. There's someone here asking for you." Sienna sat up straighter. "Who?" "Just get here. Now." She didn't even change. Just pulled on a jacket and bolted 3 blocks down to the Dandelion, a cafe sandwiched between a florist and a used bookstore, her usual writing sanctuary. The bell chimed as she pushed open the door, the scent of cinnamon and roasted espresso wrapping around her like a blanket. Jules was behind the counter, eyes wide, mouth forming a silent, "Oh my God," as she pointed toward the back. Sienna's stomach dropped. Damien Blackwell was seated in the corner, dressed down in a dark sweater and jeans, sleeves pushed up. He looked calm, almost normal, except for the part where his watch probably cost more than her apartment. He stood as she approached. "I wanted to apologize," he said, sliding his hands into his pockets. "I should have told you who I was that night." "You didn't owe me anything," she said coolly. "It was one dance." "I didn't just dance with you," he said. "I came back looking for you." She blinked. "You what?" "I left the meeting early, took the elevator down, but you were already gone." Her heart did something weird and traitorous in her chest. "Why?" He looked at her, really looked at her. "Because you made me feel like someone, not something." Sienna stared at him, trying to find the angle, the script, the trick. But there wasn't one. Just him, just her. Just 2 people who had danced one song and maybe, just maybe, weren't done yet. Sienna hadn't planned to meet Damien again. Not really. She'd left that rooftop, believing it was a blip, an impossible night carved out of someone else's story. A moment suspended in time, unconnected from her world of overdrawn accounts and cheap wine. But there he was, standing in the corner of her favorite cafe, looking both perfectly in place and completely out of sync with the rest of the world. He'd apologized, sincere and unpolished. No bodyguards, no assistants, no press. Just a man in a sweater, offering her the simplest truth. that he came back for her. She'd sat across from him, wary but curious, her fingers wrapped around a chipped coffee mug like it could protect her from the strangeness of the situation. And now, 3 days later, she found herself walking along the river's edge, shoulder to shoulder with him. The invitation had come that morning. A short message from an unknown number. Meet me at the stone bridge by the river. No pressure. Just a walk. She should have said no. It would have been the smart thing to do. But something about his restraint, his refusal to push or insist, kept echoing in her mind. So here she was, jeans and boots, hands shoved in her coat pockets, pretending she hadn't spent 15 minutes debating which scarf looked least like it came from a donation bin. Damien stood waiting near the foot of the bridge, his breath visible in the cool air. When he saw her, he smiled, soft, not smug, and that alone made her guard drop an inch. I wasn't sure you'd come, he said. I wasn't either, she replied, adjusting her pace to match his as they started walking. They didn't talk at first, and surprisingly, it wasn't awkward. The city buzzed faintly in the distance, but here by the water the world felt quieter, calmer. The path was lined with bare trees, their skeletal branches etching shapes against the gray sky. A couple passed them, holding hands. Sienna looked away. Why me? She asked suddenly. Damien glanced over. That's your opening line? I just mean, you probably meet 1,000 women who'd love to be seen with you. Why chase someone who literally ran from you? Because you ran, she frowned. That's not an answer. He paused, then said, that night, you didn't ask me what I did or what I owned. You didn't hesitate to call me out, and you didn't try to impress me. You just asked me to dance. No agenda, no performance. That's rare. You're used to people performing? He nodded. More than you'd think. In my world, most conversations have price tags. Sienna gave a half smile, and I was the clearance rack surprise. No, he said firmly. You were the first thing in years that didn't feel scripted. They walked a few more steps. You know I still don't fully trust this, right? She said, eyes on the path. You showing up at my coffee shop, texting me out of nowhere. It feels like something out of a movie. Do you want it to be? No, she said quickly. Movies lie. Real life doesn't come with soundtracks or sweeping monologues. Real life comes with overdue rent and expired peanut butter. He laughed, and it startled her, low and unguarded. I like peanut butter, he said. She rolled her eyes. Yeah, but does your peanut butter cost $30 and come with gold flakes? That sounds terrible. It exists, she muttered. I Googled once. They came to a small bench facing the water. Damien gestured, and she sat, hesitating only a little. I don't do this often, he said after a moment. What, lurk around public parks waiting for reluctant screenwriters? He chuckled. Talk. Like this, without a script. Sienna glanced sideways. You said something the other night. That I made you feel like someone, not something. What did you mean? He was quiet for a beat. I've been a headline since I was 21, he said. First for the tech thing, then for the investment firm. Then for the scandal when my co-founder tried to sell off our patents behind my back. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone wanted a piece of the story. Of me. I read some of that, she admitted. It didn't sound fun. It wasn't. My team tells me where to go, what to wear, what to say. They do it because it protects the brand, protects me. But after a while, you start to forget which parts of you are real and which parts are just armor. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. Damien looked at her, the wind teasing strands of hair across her cheek. You looked at me like I was just a guy in a suit. Not a billionaire, not a brand, just a guy. I did, she said, because that's all you were to me. That's why I came back. They sat in silence, the wind picking up around them. Can I ask you something? He said. She nodded. Why do you write? She blinked, caught off guard. Because I have to. Not want to? I mean, yeah, I want to, but mostly, it's how I process. It's how I make sense of things. If I didn't write, I think I'd unravel. What do you write about? People who want things they don't think they deserve. He nodded slowly, as if that answer meant more than she realized. They sat there for a long time, not talking, just breathing. The clouds began to clear, revealing a slice of winter sky. Damien stood first, brushing off his hands. Come with me, he said. Where? I want to show you something. She hesitated. You know how that sounds, right? Like a line. No lines, I promise, just trust me. And against all logic, she did. They walked several blocks to where his car waited, sleek, black, polished. But it wasn't a limo or some ridiculous sports car, just a well-kept vintage sedan, classic and understated. He opened the door for her and she slid in, every nerve in her body buzzing. This wasn't a date. This wasn't a fantasy. It was something in between, something realer, more uncertain. They drove out of the city, the buildings thinning, the streets growing quieter. Eventually, they pulled up to a large lake house, not massive, not garish, just beautiful in its restraint. Glass and wood and stone, lights glowing warmly from inside. "This is yours?" she asked, stepping out. "It's where I go when I want to breathe." "Seems like you don't get to breathe often." "Not until recently." He led her inside. The air smelled like cedar and something faintly citrusy. A fire crackled in the hearth. A small turntable in the corner spun old jazz. Damien poured them both glasses of wine, nothing flashy, no label she recognized. Sienna sat on a soft leather couch, eyes scanning the room. Bookshelves, old film posters, a telescope pointed at the lake. "You live here?" "Sometimes, when I want to remember who I am." "And who's that?" she asked. He paused before answering, someone trying not to be swallowed by everything he built. She sipped her wine, the heat curling through her. "This place is incredible." "I don't bring people here." "Ever?" "No." She stared at him, pulse quickening. "Why me?" He sat beside her, not touching, but close enough to feel his warmth. "Because you're not afraid to be real, because you don't want anything from me but the truth." "And what do you want?" He met her eyes. "To know what it feels like to build something that doesn't collapse when people stop watching." The fireplace snapped softly. Sienna set her glass down. "I don't trust easily." "Neither do I. If I fall into this, I'll catch you." She leaned into him, her voice low. "I don't want promises. I want honesty. That's all I've got left." She closed the space between them. The kiss wasn't perfect. It was hesitant, searching, but it wasn't empty. And when she pulled away, breathing hard, Damien didn't ask for more. He just smiled like the weight in his chest had shifted. "Okay," she said. He raised a brow. "Okay? Let's see where this goes." He nodded, eyes soft. "Let's." Outside, the lake shimmered beneath a rising moon, and for the first time in a long while, neither of them felt alone. Sienna hadn't stopped thinking about that kiss. Not the way his hands had settled gently at her waist, or how his lips had tasted faintly of red wine and unspoken promises, but the stillness afterward, the kind that didn't ask for more, didn't rush into declarations. Just two people sitting by a fire, their silence saying what words hadn't yet learned to carry. But reality had a way of sliding in through the cracks. 3 days later, she was sitting at her kitchen table with her laptop open and absolutely nothing to show for the last 2 hours except a blinking cursor and an unopened bag of trail mix. Her phone buzzed against the wood. A message from Jules. "Check your email." "Like now." Sienna raised a brow and clicked into her inbox, expecting a meme or some niche writing contest deadline. What she got instead made her stomach twist. The subject line read, "Is this your guy?" Inside was a forwarded message from an anonymous email address. No greeting, no signature, just 3 attachments and 1 sentence. "You should know who you're dealing with." She opened the first image with a numb finger. It was Damien. Same sharp jaw, same stormy eyes, but not with her. The picture had been taken at night, the lighting grainy, but clear enough to show him stepping into a black car with a woman, tall, blonde, elegant. She was laughing. He had a hand on her back. The second photo was worse. Same woman, seated beside Damien at what looked like a garden party. Champagne flutes, lush greenery. He was looking at her with a softness Sienna hadn't known he was capable of. The third was a tabloid screenshot. Blackwell and mystery heiress spark engagement rumors. The date? Less than a month ago. Sienna stared at the images, her pulse roaring in her ears. She didn't want to believe them. She didn't want to believe that she had walked into something with her eyes half open, hoping it was real. But how could she ignore this? A sharp knock at her door startled her. Jules's face appeared a second later, holding a box of takeout like it was a peace offering. "I didn't know if you'd seen it yet." Sienna stood slowly. "Is it real?" Jules nodded, stepping inside. "Looks like it, but the source is sketchy. No name, no traceable email. I tried." Sienna dropped into a chair. "He said he doesn't date, said I was the first person he's brought to that lake house." "Maybe that's still true," Jules offered carefully. "Maybe the photos are old." He could have told me. Did you ask? I shouldn't have to. Sienna ran both hands through her hair. I told him I needed honesty. I practically begged him for it. What are you going to do? Sienna didn't answer. She didn't know. All she knew was that the tight knot in her chest, hope mixed with uncertainty, had just twisted into something sharper. The next evening, she put on the only dress she owned that might pass for cocktail attire. Black, simple, unassuming. She pulled her curls into a low bun, left her heels at home, and walked the 6 blocks to the Civic Museum, where Damien had mentioned a gala benefiting urban arts restoration. She hadn't been invited, but she knew the public entrance, and she knew he'd be there. The building glowed with warm light, classical music wafting out of tall glass windows. Sienna moved through the crowd like smoke, her pulse a drumbeat behind her ribs. She found him near the sculpture garden, talking to a man in a charcoal suit. He saw her almost immediately. His smile faltered when he saw her face. Sienna, he said, stepping forward. You came. She didn't waste time. You didn't think I'd see the photos? His expression tightened. I figured you might, but not like this. So they're real. They're real, but they're not recent. She crossed her arms. That's supposed to make a difference? She's an ex. Those photos were taken almost 2 years ago. The tabloid recycles them every time I go off the radar. Then why not tell me? Why wait for me to find out from an anonymous email? He looked down, jaw tense. Because I didn't want to poison this before it started. Sienna stared at him. You didn't trust me to know the truth. It's not about trust, he said. It's about habit. My whole life has been managed, compartmentalized. I've never had a real relationship without NDAs and pre-approved venues. Her voice dropped. So I'm what? A social experiment? No. He stepped closer. You're the only thing I haven't wanted to control. She hesitated. Something in his eyes, honest, unguarded, pulled at her, but the photos still echoed in her mind. The headlines, the weight of being watched. I need time, she said. Damien nodded. But 3 hours later, the waiting changed. Jules called her from a burner number. Check the news, she said. Now. Sienna pulled up a major finance site. The headline made her knees go weak. Blackwell Capital Board pushes for resignation amid rumors of romantic entanglement. Below it was a leaked statement from the firm's executive team. They'd asked Damien to issue a formal denial of his involvement with an unnamed writer whose recent presence at multiple private events had raised concern regarding confidentiality and brand image. Sienna's name wasn't listed, but she didn't need it to be. A shudder ran through her. They were making her out to be a liability. Damien hadn't said anything, hadn't warned her. Her phone buzzed again. This time a message from him. I need to see you. Now. She almost ignored it, almost let the fear and shame win, but something deeper, stronger kept her feet moving. He was waiting at the river again. Same spot, same bench. This time his suit was rumpled, his eyes hollow. He looked like he hadn't slept. I didn't want you to find out like that, he said, standing. You were going to lie? I was going to protect you. By erasing me? No, by walking away. Her chest tightened. What? I told them no, he said. Refused to issue the statement, so now they want me out. Sienna stared. You're serious? I'm done, Sienna. I resigned. You left your company? I built that company, he said quietly, but I'm not going to stay somewhere that thinks loving someone is a scandal. The wind gusted off the water. Sienna blinked at him, too stunned to speak. I don't care what they print, he went on. I care about you, about what we're building, and if that means I lose a board seat, so be it. She sat down slowly, legs trembling. You gave up everything. I didn't, he said. I chose differently, and for the first time, it feels right. She looked at him then, really looked, and saw not the billionaire, not the tabloid headline, but the man who had stood with her in the rain. The man who'd made space for silence. The man who'd kissed her without pressure. I still don't know if I can do this, she whispered. I know, he said, but I'm not asking for forever, just for a chance. Sienna's breath caught. He didn't reach for her, didn't push, just waited. And maybe that was what did it. She leaned her head against his shoulder. I don't do easy, she said. Neither do I. They sat like that until the sky turned indigo, until the noise of the world faded behind them. And for the first time in days, Sienna let herself believe. This wasn't perfect, it wasn't polished, but it was real. And maybe that was enough. The next few days passed like a dream Sienna wasn't entirely sure she was awake for. Not a fairy tale. The gowns and glass slippers were missing, but something quieter, deeper. A soft exhale after years of holding her breath. Damien had walked away from the company he'd built with his bare hands. Not out of spite, not out of drama. But for the chance that something honest between them might matter more than press releases and boardroom politics. Still, it wasn't simple. Sienna didn't move into the lake house. She didn't quit her freelance gigs or suddenly start wearing designer dresses. She still drank instant coffee in the mornings and wrote in the same battered notebook she'd had since college. But something had shifted inside her. A room unlocked. A door cracked open. They spent their time carefully. Walks along the river, quiet dinners. Mornings spent reading beside each other with music playing low in the background. Damien didn't push, didn't crowd. He simply showed up, every time. One evening, as they wandered through an open-air antique market, Sienna caught him watching her, not with hunger or adoration, with peace, like he'd finally found something he hadn't known he'd been looking for. "What?" she asked, smiling as she adjusted a vintage ring on her finger. He tilted his head. "You're different when you're happy." She looked down at the ring. "I'm not used to it, happiness. It makes me feel like I've forgotten something." "You haven't," he said gently. "You've just been surviving for so long, you forgot what peace feels like." She swallowed the lump in her throat and slipped her hand into his. Later that night, Jules called. "You're not gonna like this," she said without preamble. Sienna sat up straighter on the couch. "What happened?" "You know that script you submitted to the Independent Voices competition?" "Yeah?" "You made the shortlist." Sienna's heart thudded. "Wait, really?" "Yes, but that's not the problem." Her stomach dropped. "Of course there's a problem. The shortlist was acquired last minute by Viridian Studios, which is under the Blackwell Creative Fund." Sienna finished, eyes narrowing. "You think Damien pulled strings?" "I don't know," Jules said carefully. "But if the story breaks that your script was chosen by a company his name is tied to, it's going to look bad. Like he handed it to you." Sienna hung up without answering. She needed to know the truth. The next morning she knocked on the glass wall of Damien's office at the lake house. He was seated at the long table near the window, laptop open, a half-full mug of coffee beside him. He looked up and smiled, but it faded quickly when he saw her expression. "I need to ask you something," she said. "Okay," he replied, cautious. "Did you have anything to do with Viridian picking up my script?" Damien's brows drew together. "What? My script? For Independent Voices? Viridian bought the shortlist. That's your company." He stood slowly. "Yes, but I had no idea they were even involved. The Creative Fund has its own team. I stepped back weeks ago." "You're saying you didn't read it? Didn't send it to someone?" "No," he said, voice firm. "Sienna, I didn't even know your script was in the running." She watched him for a long moment, trying to decide if she could believe him. He stepped closer, careful not to touch her. "You told me the only thing you wanted from me was honesty," he said. "I'm giving it to you. I would never risk your work by interfering. That's yours." She exhaled, a mix of relief and residual tension draining from her shoulders. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." But it wasn't over. Later that week, the first whispers started appearing online. Gossip columns, industry forums, a few choice tweets that exploded overnight. Up-and-coming writer Sienna Cole linked romantically to former tech mogul Damien Blackwell. Insiders claim her sudden success isn't so sudden after all. The pictures weren't flattering. One of them walking hand in hand, one of her leaving his building, one of them laughing at a cafe. And suddenly, her name wasn't just a byline, it was a hashtag. Sienna sat on her couch in the dark, phone glowing in her hand, while thousands of strangers dissected her worth. Social climber. Sleeping her way to the top. Another pretty face with nothing to say. It didn't matter that none of them had read her script, or met her, or known how many nights she'd stayed up rewriting until her fingers cramped. The narrative had been written, and it wasn't hers. When Damien called, she didn't answer. Not the first time, not the second. The third time, she finally picked up. "I saw," he said. "I didn't ask you to fix it," she replied. "I know. I didn't want this. The noise, the commentary, the shadows chasing something real. I know." There was a long pause. Then she whispered, "I'm scared." So am I, he said, but we can't run from this. We either face it or we let them rewrite us. She closed her eyes, resting her forehead against her knees. I don't want to be a story someone else tells, she said. Then let's tell it ourselves. The next morning, Sienna posted a simple message to her professional page. I've spent the last 10 years learning how to write a story worth telling. I won't apologize for falling in love while doing it. And if you still think I didn't earn this, read the pages yourself. Attached was a link to the first 10 pages of her script. It went viral, not because of the drama, not because of the headlines, but because the writing, sharp, honest, raw, spoke for itself. Agents called, producers emailed, reviewers wrote glowing words she wasn't sure how to absorb. And through it all, Damien was there, not in the spotlight, not correcting the narrative, just beside her. Quiet, steady. One night, after her first official meeting with a studio exec who wanted to option her work, they stood in his kitchen, eating pasta from mismatched bowls. I never thought I'd see this, she said, barefoot, hair in a messy bun. What? You, me, normal. He smiled. This is your version of normal? No, she said, but it's mine. He set his bowl down, reached for her hand. I want more nights like this, he said. Not the chaos, not the press, just this. She nodded. So do I. Then he pulled something from his back pocket, a small square box. Her heart stopped. Wait, she said, you're not? I'm not proposing. Not like that. He opened the box to reveal a ring, but not a diamond, a simple band with a single sapphire. I didn't pick this because it was expensive, he said. I picked it because it reminded me of you. She stared at it, breath caught in her throat. I'm not asking for marriage, not yet. I'm asking for us, for the promise that whatever comes next, we face it together. She nodded slowly, eyes misting. Yes. He slipped the ring on her finger and kissed her softly, carefully, like the moment deserved reverence. When they pulled apart, Sienna whispered, You really believe we can have this? I believe we already do. Outside, the world still buzzed, the headlines still churned. But in that kitchen, in that sliver of light between their shadows, Sienna knew one thing with absolute certainty. This story, hers, his, theirs, was finally one she wanted to live in. The air outside the screening room was cooler than expected. Sienna stood just beneath the marquee of the historic Lyric Theater, her arms wrapped loosely around herself, as the last guests filtered out of the private showing of Burn Marks, the indie drama based on her script. The lights above buzzed faintly. Her name had been printed on the movie poster, dead center. It still didn't feel real. Inside, industry heads were clinking glasses and shaking hands. There'd been laughter, whispers of promising voice, and fresh perspective. But Sienna hadn't heard any of it clearly. Her pulse had been too loud in her ears. She needed air. Behind her, the double doors creaked open again. She turned, expecting to see Jules or a studio assistant, but it was Damien. He looked a little out of place in the low light, wearing a black dress shirt with the sleeves rolled, no jacket, no tie, always slightly undone, like he belonged and didn't, all at once. You disappeared, he said gently. I needed a second, she replied, looking up at the glowing marquee. Is it weird that the thing that feels most unreal is seeing my name in Helvetica? Damien smiled and moved beside her. I think it's exactly right. She watched the reflection of her name in the theater glass. It's strange, she murmured. All this noise, the applause, the praise, and I still feel like someone's going to pull a curtain back and say, just kidding, she's not supposed to be here. He was quiet for a moment, then said, When I launched my first company, I used to sleep in my office. There was this janitor who came in every night around 2 a.m., and every time he saw me, he'd just nod and say, Still here, huh? She tilted her head, curious. What did you say? I'd always lie, say I was just wrapping up, even when I hadn't slept in 2 days, because I was terrified if I admitted how much I didn't belong, it would become true. Sienna exhaled slowly. That's exactly it. You belong, he said simply. And even if they don't all see it yet, you already proved it to the only person that matters. She glanced sideways. Me? You. A few seconds passed. Then she gave a small smile and leaned her head against his shoulder. They stayed like that, the city's quiet hum filling the spaces between them, until Jules poked her head out of the doors. Hey, they want you inside for final thank yous. Sienna groaned. Do I have to? Yes, Miss Big Shot, you made the film. Now you have to shake hands like a grown-up. Sienna kissed Damien on the cheek. Back in a minute? I'll be right here. She followed Jules inside, head held just a little higher. But Damien didn't stay outside. Instead, he paced a few steps down the sidewalk, reaching into his pocket to retrieve a folded piece of paper. It was soft with wear, the edges smudged from being handled too often. A printout of a query letter, Sienna's first email submission to Blackwell Creative. She'd sent it under a pseudonym months ago, long before they'd ever met. He'd found it again after the press storm had calmed, tucked it into his wallet, a reminder, not just of how they started, but why he'd fallen for her. He could still remember reading it that first night, alone in his apartment, stunned by the honesty in her voice. The letter had said, "I'm not famous, I don't have a degree from somewhere impressive, but I write stories that hurt a little, because life does too." He hadn't known her name yet, but he'd known he was looking at something rare. He was still staring at the paper when Sienna came back outside. "What's that?" she asked. He looked up, caught red-handed. "Your query letter from before." Her eyes widened. "You kept it?" "I never stopped reading it." She blinked, emotions warring in her face. "I didn't even know you'd seen it." "I didn't tell you. I didn't want it to feel like I had a say in what you earned. But Sienna, you blew them away on your own." He handed the paper to her. She held it like it might break, smoothing the creases gently with her thumb. "I used to read this every night when I felt like quitting," he said. She laughed softly. "You? Mr. Forbes' cover? I'm not invincible, you know." "I know," she said. "That's why I love you." His expression softened, like the world had slowed around them. "I love you too," he said. "Every word, every silence, every messy, unfiltered second of you." She stepped forward, tucking the letter into her bag, and kissed him. Not hurried, not fiery, just real. Later that week, they stood together in front of the townhouse she rented. It was nothing fancy, a bit creaky, a bit drafty, but hers. Damien was leaving for a week-long retreat he'd signed up for months ago. A tech-free sabbatical at some converted monastery. She'd teased him mercilessly. "You're going to survive 7 days without email?" She smirked, helping him carry his bag down the steps. "I make no promises," he grinned, "but I'm told the monks brew great coffee." She wrapped her arms around his waist. "Try not to enlighten yourself so much that you forget me." "Not possible." They kissed goodbye on the sidewalk, cars rushing past like background music. She stood there, watching him disappear into the back of a quiet black car, her heart full and light in equal measure. The quiet didn't last. 3 days into his retreat, a knock came at her door just past 10 p.m. Jules stood on the porch, barefoot, still in her pajamas, holding her phone with trembling hands. "You need to see this," she said. The article was short. Brutal. Blackwell Capital faces internal audit amid claims of asset misappropriation. The subtext, a quiet whisper about personal accounts, offshore holdings, and a certain romantic partner whose rise may not be as clean as it seems. The implication couldn't be clearer. They were trying to blame her. Sienna's knees nearly gave out. Jules caught her arm. "Don't panic," Jules said. "They're grasping. He's gone off-grid and the board is scrambling. This is retaliation." "But if they make this stick," Sienna whispered, "they'll ruin both of us." Jules's eyes burned. "Then we fight back." Sienna barely slept. The next day, she showed up at the Viridian office in Midtown. No appointment. Just her, in a blazer that still smelled faintly of last week's popcorn, carrying a file folder full of every time-stamped email, every contract, every version of the screenplay, proof she had pitched her story long before Damien was ever involved. The woman at the front desk tried to turn her away. Sienna refused to budge. Eventually, the CEO, an older woman named Cassandra Lynn, who'd been quietly following Sienna's career, called her into a glass-walled office. "I read the script myself," Cassandra said. "Twice." "I didn't steal anything," Sienna said. "I didn't use anyone. I wrote something good, and they don't like that they didn't control it." Cassandra leaned back. "That's exactly what I told them." Sienna blinked. "Wait, what?" "I'm not pulling your contract," the CEO said calmly. "We'll handle the press. You stay out of it. Let us protect you now." Sienna left the building in tears, but for once, they weren't from fear. When Damien returned the following week, sunburned and carrying a notebook full of ideas scribbled in pencil, he found her sitting in his kitchen, legs crossed on the counter, surrounded by paperwork. "I thought I told you not to wait up," he teased. She stood, walked across the room, and hugged him so tightly it made him drop the notebook. "I thought I lost you," she said into his shoulder. "Not a chance," he murmured. She pulled back and looked into his eyes. "They tried to pin it on me." "I know. You told me we'd face it together. And we will," he promised. All of it. That night, after the world had quieted, after the threat had passed, after they'd fallen asleep wrapped in one another's arms on the couch, Sienna whispered, almost to herself, "This story is scarier than I thought." Damien's voice, low and sure, answered, "The good ones always are." And neither of them let go. It was a Thursday when the noise finally died down. The tabloids moved on to fresher scandals. The boardroom whispers faded. Her name stopped trending on forums filled with cynics who'd never read a page of her work. And in that strange quiet, Sienna found herself unsure of what came next. Not because she didn't want more, but because, for the first time, no one was pushing her forward or pulling her back, just stillness. She sat on the floor of Damien's living room one afternoon, surrounded by half-folded laundry and a sleeping cat that had adopted them without permission. A soft storm tapped at the windows. Outside, the lake rippled beneath silver-gray skies. Inside, everything smelled like fresh linen and faint cedar. Damien was working in the next room, pacing occasionally, reading something aloud to himself before groaning and muttering, No, that's garbage." She smiled without looking up. There were still questions hanging in the air between them, about what came next, about how they'd fit their lives together without losing themselves. But neither of them seemed in a rush to solve everything at once. That night, Damien made dinner. Badly. The pasta was overcooked, the garlic bread slightly charred, and the wine a bit too bold for the meal. But Sienna swore it was perfect, mostly because he kept laughing at himself, waving a dish towel like a white flag. Afterward, they lay on the couch, limbs tangled, an old jazz record crackling through the speakers. Sienna's head rested on Damien's chest, rising and falling with each breath. "I have a crazy idea," he said. She tilted her head. "You say that like it's new," he chuckled. "I'm serious. I'm listening." Damien pulled a folded piece of paper from the stack on the coffee table. It was a mock-up, a logo design, simple and elegant. At the center, a quill inked in deep navy blue. "Vesper Press," it read. She sat up slowly. "What is this?" He looked at her. "A publishing imprint. Creative control, your name on the masthead, full independence, run however you want." Her heart started to pound. Is this for me?" "For us," he said, "but especially you." Sienna swallowed. "Damien, I don't want you to just hand me something. I'm not." He reached for her hand. "You've built something already. This is just space to grow it, safely, on your terms. And you're stepping back, again?" "I don't want to be the story anymore," he said softly. "I want to help tell better ones, yours, other writers like you." She looked at the logo again. "Vesper. My mother's middle name," he added, voice quieter. "She was the first person who ever told me stories mattered more than money." Sienna's chest ached in the best kind of way. "You sure about this?" She whispered. "I've never been more sure of anything." They didn't sign anything that night. No contracts, no announcements, just a quiet promise, sealed with a kiss, in the stillness of a house that no longer felt borrowed. In the weeks that followed, the pieces began falling into place. They hired a small team, mostly women, mostly overlooked, mostly brilliant. Vesper Press moved into a corner suite above a used bookstore downtown, with old hardwood floors and windows that let in too much light. Sienna painted one wall herself, hands stained teal for days. They launched the first manuscript 2 months later. It was a collection of short stories by a first-time author from Pittsburgh, filled with grit and humor and grief. Sienna wrote the foreword. Damien delivered the first box of printed copies to the author's apartment himself. They didn't host a flashy party. They just sat on the floor of the office with pizza and cheap wine and passed the book around, each person running their fingers over the spine like it was sacred. That night, Damien and Sienna walked home together, fingers laced, the spring air cool and fragrant with budding trees. "Feels like the start of something real," she said. "It is. You know, when I met you I thought you were just a rich guy in a suit." "I was," she smiled. "Not anymore." He squeezed her hand. "Not since you walked into that ballroom like a storm." As the months passed, their rhythm settled. Work and life blurred, but in the best kind of way. Morning coffee turned into brainstorming sessions. Afternoons were quiet bursts of writing and meetings. Evenings were for walks, sometimes barefoot, sometimes through rain, always hand in hand. They learned how to argue, not with raised voices, but with honesty. Sienna hated when Damien interrupted her mid-thought. Damien struggled when she shut down under pressure. But they learned, adjusted, chose each other, again and again. One Sunday morning, Damien woke up to find Sienna on the back deck, her knees pulled to her chest, notebook open in her lap. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, stepping out, barefoot and sleepy. "Too many ideas," she said, yawning. "That's your fault, by the way. How do you figure? You make me feel safe, which apparently makes me creative." "Damn, I was aiming for mysterious and brooding." She laughed and set the notebook down. He joined her, wrapping a blanket around both their shoulders. They sat like that, watching the lake ripple, letting the world slow. "I've been thinking," he said after a while. "Dangerous. I want to take a step further back, from the tech investments, from the boards, all of it." She turned to him. "Really?" He nodded. "I want to build this, our version of a life. Not one built on launches and deals and private flights, just this. Books, mornings, small victories." Sienna's eyes shimmered. "I want that too." And they did it. Damien officially stepped down from his final board seat by summer. The news made headlines for about half a day, but he didn't read them. He was too busy fixing a leaky faucet at the lake house and reorganizing the Vesper Press storage closet after Sienna had declared it a crime scene. They celebrated their first full year together quietly. A picnic on the dock, a bottle of wine, a notebook filled with ridiculous someday ideas scribbled between grilled cheese recipes and quotes they'd saved. They still weren't married, not yet, but there was a drawer in her dresser filled with his socks, a copy of her favorite book with his notes in the margins, a ceramic mug they fought over every morning. One night, as summer faded into the crisp blush of fall, they sat under a string of lights in the backyard, fire pit crackling, music soft. "I used to think I'd need the world to change before I could have this," she said, curling deeper into her sweater. "What changed? I stopped waiting for permission to be happy." He looked at her like she was the only light he'd ever known. "I'm glad you asked me to dance," he said. "I'm glad you said yes." They toasted with wine, their glasses clinking softly under the stars. No headlines, no cameras, no applause, just two people who had once been strangers in a ballroom, now writing a life together. One chapter, one morning, one imperfect, beautiful moment at a time. The ring wasn't a surprise, not really, but it still took Sienna's breath away. It wasn't delivered in a velvet box, at a candlelit dinner, or hidden in a dessert, or presented on bended knee in some Instagram-worthy tableau. It arrived quietly, almost without ceremony, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon in their sunroom, while Sienna was barefoot in one of Damien's old button-downs, and he was making her laugh by dramatically reading rejection letters from his early startup days. She just wiped tears of laughter from her eyes when he looked at her with that particular softness, like she was both the punchline and the miracle, and said, "I have something for you." And then he walked out of the room and came back with a small, worn leather pouch. He placed it in her hand, closed her fingers around it. "You don't have to say yes right away, or at all, but I need you to know this is how serious I am." Sienna opened it slowly. Inside was a ring, delicate, with a single moonstone set in a thin rose gold band. No diamonds, no flash, just something that shimmered quietly in the light, like her. Her breath caught. "Damien, it's not about marriage," he said gently. "Not yet. It's about choice. It's about building something not because we're supposed to, but because we want to. I want this, with you, all of it." She looked up at him, heart swelling with 1,000 unsaid things. "So do I." He slipped the ring on her finger. It fit perfectly. Afterward, they sat curled together on the sunroom floor, the rain tapping against the windows like applause, and made lists. Not of wedding plans, but of things they wanted their life to include. Pasta nights with bad garlic bread. A dog, maybe two. Sunday mornings in bed with coffee and silence. A shelf filled with books they both loved. An old truck with a broken radio. A porch swing. Time. They didn't post anything. Didn't call anyone right away. It was theirs. And for now, that was enough. When they finally did tell people, Jules first, then a slow trickle of family and close friends, the reactions were warm and genuine. No one asked about the size of the ring or the venue. Everyone just said, "It makes sense," with the kind of certainty that made Sienna feel like maybe, finally, she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The wedding was planned slowly, intentionally. No event planners, no sponsorships, just sticky notes and scribbled margins and hours spent debating whether wildflowers or olive branches felt more them. They chose a vineyard tucked in the rolling hills of the Berkshires, not because it was trendy, but because it was quiet, intimate, honest. Sienna insisted on walking barefoot. "If I can't feel the ground, I'll float away," she told Damien one night while they danced in their living room, practicing not tripping over each other. He kissed her temple. "I'll keep you grounded." On the morning of the wedding, the sky was a pale, cloudless blue. The air smelled like lavender and old stone. The chapel was small, ivy crawling up its sides, the wooden pews worn smooth by time. Jules helped Sienna into her dress, soft silk that moved like water, with tiny embroidered stars scattered across the sleeves. Her hair was twisted up with white blooms tucked between the curls. She wore no veil, no heels. Just a simple chain around her neck and the moonstone ring still on her finger. "You're sure about this?" Jules whispered, more teasing than serious. Sienna met her eyes in the mirror. "I've never been more sure about anything." Damien waited at the front of the chapel, wearing a charcoal suit with no tie, his hair slightly tousled, his expression unreadable until she stepped into the aisle. Then everything shifted. He didn't smile, didn't laugh. He just looked at her like she was the only thing in the world that made sense. She walked toward him slowly, feeling every step, the gravel beneath her feet, the sunlight on her skin, the weight of every moment that had led her here. When the officiant asked if she would take Damien as her husband, her voice didn't shake. "I do." When he said the same, his gaze didn't leave hers. Not for a second. They exchanged vows they'd written in secret. Hers spoke of the way he saw her when she didn't even know she was looking. His spoke of the night she asked him to dance, and how everything since had been a choice to keep choosing her. No one clapped, no one cheered, just a deep, reverent silence that felt like the world holding its breath. Later, as the sun dipped low and the vineyard glowed with soft string lights, they danced beneath the canopy of trees. The band played something slow, something old, and Damien pulled her close. "Do you realize," he murmured near her temple, "you've completely ruined my ability to focus on anything else?" "You weren't exactly focused before I came along," she whispered back. "That's true," he said, smiling. "But now I don't even pretend." They danced long after the song ended. Their guests eventually joined them, but Sienna barely noticed. The world narrowed to the way his hands felt on her waist. The way his eyes crinkled when he looked at her. The way she could feel his heartbeat beneath her fingertips. As the night wound down and the last of the guests wandered back to the cottages, they walked hand in hand through the vineyard, shoes forgotten somewhere near the dance floor. The stars stretched out above them. The air was cool and sweet. They reached the small stone cottage they'd rented for the weekend. The door creaked as they entered. Sienna kicked off her remaining jewelry, curled onto the old velvet couch by the fireplace, and sighed deeply. Damien sat beside her, tugging off his jacket, then his tie, which she promptly stole and draped around her neck like a scarf. "I didn't think I could have this," he said after a moment. "Have what?" "This peace," he said quietly. "This quiet kind of joy." She reached for his hand. "You can. You do." He looked at her like she was something he'd never thought to ask for but had found anyway. Then he stood and crossed the room to retrieve something from the inside pocket of his jacket. "I almost didn't show you this," he said, holding it out. She took it, unfolding it slowly. It was a letter. Her letter. The one she'd sent to Blackwell Creative under a fake name long before she'd met him. Before the dance. Before the whirlwind. "You read it," she said, voice catching. "I didn't just read it," he said. "I sent it to our editorial director under a pseudonym. She doesn't know it's you yet." Sienna's eyes stung. "She called it the most emotionally honest manuscript she's read in 5 years, he added. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. "I know, but I believe in you, and if the world doesn't see what I see, I'll help them look harder." She leaned forward, kissed him softly, and let herself fall into his arms. "I love you," she said against his neck. "I love you more," he replied, holding her tighter. I think that's impossible. Then I guess we'll have to keep trying to prove each other wrong. They fell asleep there, wrapped in each other, the fire burning low, their wedding clothes crumpled and forgotten. Outside, the wind stirred the vines gently. The stars blinked like they knew a secret. And inside the cottage, two people who had once danced as strangers now dreamed as something much, much more. Winter arrived with little ceremony. Just a few early flakes tumbling past the windows one quiet morning, catching in the bare branches outside their lake house. Sienna stood at the kitchen sink, hands wrapped around a chipped mug, watching the white gather across the dock and rooftops. She smiled to herself. Last year, she might have dreaded the cold. This year, it felt like a blanket, an invitation to stay in, to write, to live quietly and fully. Life didn't get louder after the wedding. It didn't balloon into extravagance or spiral into chaos. It deepened, rooted itself. Some days still felt like storms, but more often than not, they found themselves living in the kind of rhythm neither of them thought they'd ever have. The sunroom became Sienna's writing haven, its windows fogged each morning with breath and frost. Her desk was now a proper desk, no longer an ironing board or cafe table, and it was always cluttered with notes, pens, and half-drunk mugs of tea. Damien would check on her around noon, like clockwork, placing a sandwich near her elbow, or sneaking a hand under her sweater just to feel her warmth. Vesper Press flourished without spectacle. They launched 5 books in their first year, each from an author with something to say and no big name behind them, exactly what Sienna had dreamed. Damien stayed on as silent partner, letting her lead, watching with pride every time an email arrived from a reader who had found a piece of themselves inside those pages. Spring brought birdsong and bursts of green. They hosted Sunday brunches with mismatched chairs pulled onto the deck, friends from both their worlds mingling over pancakes and fruit. Jules came often, staying late, always reminding Sienna that her life was still hers, that she hadn't disappeared into someone else's. One afternoon in May, Sienna stood in the kitchen, barefoot in overalls, flipping through a stack of handwritten letters that had come in after her short story was reprinted in a national magazine. She laughed aloud at one that opened with, "Dear Sienna, your writing makes me feel like I just got punched in the heart, but in a good way." Damien walked in, holding 2 mugs of coffee. "I'll take that as a review quote." She grinned and reached for a mug. "I can't believe people send letters. It's because they feel seen." She looked at him. "You helped me find my voice, you know." He shook his head. "You never lost it. You just needed someone to remind you it was worth listening to." They kissed then, the kind of kiss that didn't ask for anything, just said, "Here we are." Still choosing. By summer, the lake had warmed enough for late-night swims. Sienna would dive off the dock just before sunset, her laughter echoing across the water while Damien waited with a towel and some sarcastic remark about hypothermia. They built a fire pit and spent long evenings toasting marshmallows and talking about the future, not in milestones but in feelings. "I want more stillness," Damien said one night, flicking a twig into the flames. Sienna nodded. "I want more stories." "You'll write them." "I want to live them first." "You are," he said. Autumn colored the hills in oranges and golds. They went apple picking, came home with too many, and baked pies just to give them away. Sienna's second book began to take shape in the late hours of early October. It wasn't about Damien, not directly, but he lived in the spaces between the lines, in the characters who learned how to open their hearts after long winters. One afternoon, while she was knee-deep in edits, Damien knocked on the sunroom door and poked his head in. "Come with me." "I'm in the middle of something," she said, pen in hand. He grinned. "That's never stopped you before." He led her out back, across the yard and into the trees behind the property. The air smelled like earth and pine. They walked for 5 minutes until they reached a clearing where sunlight filtered through the canopy. In the center stood a tiny structure, unfinished, raw wood, windows still missing glass. "What is this?" she asked. "A studio," he said. "For you." Her eyes widened. "You're building me a studio?" "I thought you might want a place that's yours. Not for work, not for publishing, just for dreaming." Sienna stepped inside, ducking under the doorframe. The space was small, just one room, but the light was perfect. She imagined shelves along the wall, a worn rug, a couch where she could curl up with drafts that made her cry or scream. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say you'll keep writing." She turned. "I will. Always." They stood together in that unfinished room, holding hands, already filling the space with 1,000 possibilities. When winter returned, it didn't sneak this time. It arrived in a single night, blanketing everything in silence. Sienna woke to a sky so white it looked like someone had erased the horizon. She padded into the kitchen and found Damien there, already dressed, boots by the door. "I have a surprise," he said. He led her out to the car and drove them to the bookstore downtown, the one where she used to scribble in corners when the apartment had felt too small. She hadn't been back in a while. It looked the same, but something about it felt different now. They stepped inside. The air was warm, filled with the scent of paper and cinnamon, and there, near the front display, was a table stacked high with her second novel. Her name, her words, her story. She stood frozen for a moment, hand over her mouth. "First printing sold out online this morning," Damien said softly. "This is the last box they had." Sienna blinked, heart hammering. "You didn't tell me." "I wanted you to see it like this, quietly, in a place that matters." She reached for one copy, fingers trembling. The clerk behind the counter noticed her and smiled. "Wait, you're her, aren't you? The author?" Sienna turned, sheepish. "Yeah, that's me." "Your first book made me call my mom for the first time in 2 years," the woman said. "So, thanks for that." Sienna laughed through tears. "You're welcome." They bought 3 copies, one for the lake house, one for the office, one to send to her father, even if she wasn't sure he'd ever open it. Hope had a way of lingering. Later that night, back at home, they curled up by the fire. Damien read aloud while she closed her eyes and let the sound of his voice wrap around her like warmth. "I want this forever," she murmured. He looked at her over the top of the book. "Then we'll keep building it." She reached for his hand. "We don't have to be perfect. We just have to be real." Outside, snow began to fall again, layering over the world they'd built together, page by page, breath by breath. And in the quiet of that long, slow evening, Sienna finally understood something she'd always struggled to believe. She didn't have to chase happiness. She'd already written herself into it. At its heart, this story reminds us that love built on truth is stronger than any headline, legacy, or fear. Sienna and Damien came from 2 different worlds, one shaped by struggle, the other by privilege. But what brought them together was neither wealth nor circumstance. It was the courage to be honest, to stand in vulnerability, and to choose each other in the face of doubt, judgment, and pressure. We often believe that success must come at the cost of authenticity. That to be loved, we must fit into a mold or wear a mask. But this story proves the opposite, that the most powerful connections happen when we allow ourselves to be seen, exactly as we are. Sienna didn't need a perfect life to deserve love. Damien didn't need to protect his empire to prove his worth. What they needed was trust, patience, and the willingness to keep showing up, especially when things got hard. Their journey teaches us that it's not grand gestures or fairy tale endings that make a relationship real, but the quiet, consistent choice to stay and build something honest. So no matter where you come from or what you've been through, remember this: you are worthy of love that sees you, not just admires you. And you are capable of creating a life that feels like home. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. We'd love to know. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories about love, healing, and the quiet power of choosing each other.